Okay, so welcome. Here in not so sunny Toronto. Okay, so I hope everybody's well and everybody had a uh, relaxing time, certainly there in Israel. It's sort of calming down and hoping that everybody had a good Chag and back to learning. I'm going to do like just a very quick review just so that put ourselves back into where we are. Divrei HaYamim, the first section, Divrei HaYamim Alef. We're in Perek Hay, and this is the fifth of 9 chapters, which really are almost purely genealogy. And so the question is that we discussed at length at the beginning is what's going on here. And I just want to reiterate a few things. Ezra HaSofer wrote Divrei Yamim with Ruach HaKodesh. It's therefore not Nevuah, it's in the Ketuvim. It's the last book of the um, of the Tanakh. And the distinctions of Divrei HaYamim Aleph and Bet are not Jewish distinctions, it's just for convenience, started by the non-Jews, but it's really one book. Now, what Ezra Sofer was doing was he had the people coming back from Churban Abayit, from the exile 70 years. This is after Koresh issued his permission to go back to Israel, and he's dealing with a nation that comes back to the land, sees all the destruction, is bothered by enemies, and what he wants to do is give them inspiration, give them um, koach, give them strength to continue learning, to continue building, to continue growing. So what he does, in fact, is that the first 9 chapters are just kind of catching you up to the stories of um, King David, and then afterwards we go into the stories of Shmuel Al, Shmuel Bet, Melachim Al, Melachim Bet. And what he wants to do is show, number one, that the creation of the world is moving directly toward Malchus Beis David and eventually to Mashiach. He also wants to show that um, the line of Judaism, it's like I was laughing at I don't know how to be political, but a certain person was suggesting that the Jews aren't really the Jews and we have to check our DNA, and it's like preposterous. Because there's Jews who can trace themselves back generations and generations and generations. It's quite insane if you think about it. But here you have this all laid out for us. So it's important to understand the generations that Ezra goes through. First of all, he's proving that everything is heading in a certain direction, in the direction of Malchus Beis David, and he's showing the direct line from the creation of the world. And so the Perek Aleph is basically Adam to Yaakov. Yaakov is always called Yisrael. Perek Bet is going from Yaakov straight to David. Then we talk in chapter 3 about David's descendants, all the way, hopefully, to a Mashiach, symbolically or midrashically Mashiach. And then chapter 4, we went into the lineage of the other tribes from Yehuda, of course, that's David's tribe, and Shimon, that was related. And now up to chapter 5, we are going backwards a little bit. We're going to the lineage of Reuven, who is really the oldest. And one other thought, just in part of our review, just to remember that the Gemara says that this sefer needs to be darshan. It's not a sefer that can be read in its uh, simplest meaning. We always say in the Chumash, like Ena mikra yotzei de pshuto, but in Divrei HaYamim, you need the drash. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the overall view of the chapter. It's a long chapter. We'll have to talk fast. You see here, B'nai Reuven. Now, what's going to happen is we went to Yehuda, who was like the Ikar. Shimon is kind of the partner with Yehuda in the inheritance. So Shimon gets a list. And now we're going back to ostensibly be the first Reuven, and we'll talk about why he isn't and in a minute. But you see here B'nai Reuven, have Pasuk Aleph, and then B'nai Gad, and B'nai Reuven Gad half of Menashe, and then half of Menashe. So what we're doing is we're moving to the east bank of the Jordan. We're going to just talk about what is the fate of those tribes, starting with Reuven and going into the general. And then we see here the discussion of the 2.5 tribes, the half tribe of Menashe, and then we're going to move on to the tribe of Levi. That's basically the general outline of Perek Hey. Now, yes. See, I was able to, Baruch Hashem, get our usual addition up. So we'll begin. Ubnei Reuven b'chor Yisrael, this pasuk Aleph, ki hu ha-b'chor. It's a very, very interesting thing that the Divrei HaYamim does for us here, right? The Divrei HaYamim wants you to understand that Reuven is basically, and this is the Vilna Gaon's understanding of this story, Reuven is Bechor at this point only in name. He's lost the greatness of being the firstborn. How come? Uvechalalo yitzui aviv nitna b'chorato l'vnei Yosef ben Israel. Since he desecrated the bed, Yitzua could be bed, bedding, sleeping arrangements of his father, his Bechorah, his birthright, was given to the sons of Yosef ben Israel. Below Lehit Yaches La Bechorah. And it's not, we do not want to relate it to the Bechorah, to his. In other words, first of all, if you notice that the word Lehit Yaches, it's going to be in Divrei HaYamim spelled with a sin as opposed to a samach. In modern Hebrew, Yehus is always with a samach. So just nobody talks about this. I look for someone to discuss. Why is this word spelled wrong? I don't know. Okay, we'll just have to wing it. In any event, we have to go back to the story of Reuven to understand this. We'll just kind of, here. Hopefully I have this all in order, so should be able to see. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Here. Okay, in Bereshis. So what do we see here in Bereshis? I'm not sure. Vayhi b'shkon Yisrael ba'eretz hahi vayelech Reuven vayishkav et Bilha pilegesh aviv vayishma Yisrael. Pause in the middle of a pasuk. You see the pay here. That means that there's a space in it. In the kolach would be a space. Vayehu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar. So this is a very famous discussion, and it says that Reuven slept with Bilha, the concubine of his father, and his father heard about it. Pause. And Yaakov had 12 sons. So the way the Mefarshim describe this, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, is something that I think most people are familiar with, and we don't have so much time. But the Medrash says, okay, and we're going to look here at the Gemara. Okay. This is the famous Gemara in Shabbos, page 55. Hope you can see me clearly here. The light is not great. And 55b in Shabbos, we have this famous discussion. Amar B'Shmuel Bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonatan, Kol Omer Reuven Chata Eino El Toah. Anyone who says Reuven sinned is mistaken. Okay, Shenamar Vayu B'nei Yaakov Shnei Masar, because Yaakov had 12 sons. Melamed Shekul Shkul Gechad. In other words, if Reuven had actually slept with his father's wife, that terrible crime would have taken him out of the klal. He would no longer be considered one of Yaakov's 12 sons. Elamani Mekayem Vayishkav Bilha. How could I understand this comment that he slept with Bilha, the concubine of his father? Milamed shebilbil matzao shel aviv umalalav hakatuv kilu shachabima. Because he changed the sleeping arrangements, the text is saying he slept with her. Now, of course, how does this go? Right? Then we see the Gemara explains it. When Rachel died, okay, so Rachel was his primary wife and the one he loved the most. So when she died, Yaakov did not move like each one of the wives had their own tent. So instead of moving into Leah's tent, which would have been according to Reuven, certainly the correct and most respectful way of behaving, Yaakov moved his things into Bilhah's tent. That was Rachel's maidservant. This offended Reuven. He was very upset by this. And to preserve the honor of his mother, he moved Yaakov's arrangements back to Leah's tent. Now, this is considered a grave sin. You're interfering with your father's most private and intimate arrangements, and therefore he lost his bechorah. So if you check here, right, this is in the bracha at the end of Parashas Vayechi. Yaakov says to him, Reuven bechori ata. You are my firstborn, Reuven. Kofi v'rosh oni. You are my strength. You are my first strength, my first child, the first one I gave birth to, right? Or conceived, let's say. Yeter seit v'yeter az. You should have been superior in rank. You should have been superior in strength. However, pachas kamayim altotar, because you are hasty like water, you will not be superior, because you went up onto the bed of your father. And again, this is according to Chazal, not literally true. You desecrated my bed, and therefore he is not going to have the bechorah. So what happens later? Okay, and this is not going to be so clear here. And also, okay, I'm not going to, let me see, it's here. Okay, we're not going to go to that yet. Okay, so basically going back, so there's a couple of things here. Number one, what is the birthright? What does the bechorah consist of? It consists of pishtayim. The bechorah gets double portion. So in this case, Yosef is the one who gets double portion. And later on, and I didn't open this for you, but if you remember, Yaakov says to Yosef, right, I am giving you another portion, right? And he says also, Ephraim and Manasseh are just like Reuven and Shimon to me. They're just going to be like my sons. So we see that happens in the division of the land, that when the Bnei Israel comes to the land of Israel, so actually Ephraim gets land and Manasseh gets land. So that's a double portion of the Bechor. Meantime, if he should have had kingship, how did he lose kingship? Now, take a look at Pasuk Bet. Bet. Ki Yehuda gavar be'echav ulenagid mimenu v'habachora Yosef. So Yehuda, gavar, he was the great one of his brothers, and he became the nagid, he became the ruler from them, and the bechorah, the birthright, went to Yosef. So we're talking about two separate things here. One is that the kingship does not come from Reuven, and the other is that the pishtayim doesn't come from Reuven. So Reuven lost on these two counts. And why does Yehuda get it? So this is an interesting thing. If we look here, I'm trying to keep myself organized. What happens when um, there's a crisis in the family, right? Yosef comes to Shechem and they see him and they say, let's kill him. And Reuven hears, Vayishma Reuven Vayatzilehu mi'adam. Reuven hears and he saves him from their hand. Vayomer lo naken, let's not hurt him, right? Al tishbachu dam, don't shed blood, put him in the pit. And it says clearly, Leman hatzil oto mi'adam. He intended to save him and take him back to his father. But the strange events happen that when they take Yosef and they actually throw him in the pit, right? And then they see the Ishmaelites coming, right? Um, Yehuda says, why should we kill him? Let's sell him. And in that way, Yehuda actually saves him. But then we have to ask ourselves, where is Reuben? Where did Reuben go? And here we have another thing by Yashavu and Albor afterwards. V'nei ein Yosef babor, vayikrat begadav. Hayeled einenu v'ani ala. Where is the boy? What am I going to do? So here we have, at the time of this, crisis in the family, Reuven is out of the picture. He means well. He intends to save Yosef, but where is he? And it says that Rashi that he was busy with sackcloth and ashes. He was doing tshuva because he had moved Yaakov's bed. And there's other ideas here that he was supposed to help Yaakov, but in any event, if he had been there, he would have saved Yosef, but he wasn't there. So now we have a couple of very important things to learn from here. And one is that you cannot be hasty. Then we're talking about it, always talk about our life lessons. Number one, Reuben's problem, right? Pachas kamayim, he was hasty. He acted without thinking. You don't do that. You might be right. You might be 100% on ball for your mother's honor. It could really rattle you. But when you have to stop and think, then you could say, wait a minute, isn't my place to do this? Perhaps I should have an open discussion with my father. Perhaps I should present to him the case. But to take that matter into my own hands, it's not appropriate. So this is a very sad story that we see with Reuben. And the second thing that we learn here, and this is really what it says here, Yehuda gavar be'echav. Yehuda was Gur Aryeh. He was a leader at the time of leadership. Now, he, of course, was the one who said we should sell Yosef, but they wanted to kill Yosef. So in a certain sense, he actually was the one who saved his life. It's also important to note that everybody listened to him. He did have that leadership quality. And Reuven kind of blew it. He wasn't up there. He wasn't there at the time that he should have been. And that's a very big, sad thing, right? So it seems as if Ezra wants to point out, first of all, understand that the phraseology in this pasuk, B'chal lo yitzui aviv, right? He desecrated his father's bed. It doesn't put it in the same way that he slept with Bilhah. So it's another proof that this wasn't the actual sin. Just by the by, that whole section of the Gemara is something very, very interesting. And each one of these cases is worth a discussion. This anyone who says the sons of Eli sinned is wrong, the sons of Shmuel is wrong. It goes through every different person and says, no, David, they didn't actually sin. It wasn't exactly that. So how do we understand that? Basically, right, Rav Hirsch says it's showing us that they were human. They were human. They sinned, but they didn't sin the way we sin. And Rav Dessler has a whole discussion of it. Rav Dessler wants us to understand, and this is the general take of Chazal on all these stories. I'm giving you a loose discussion because we can't go into each one, but if you go there, each one has a different reason why the Chazal say it wasn't exactly that. But you have to understand that when a great person sins, the the level of the sin is judged in a much harsher way, right? Hashem is medactic, right? Kichut hasara. It says in Tilim v'svivav nisara ma'od, with the seyar, with the sin, that the God tests the great people. The smallest infraction is magnified because Hashem expects more from them. And similarly, it says about Moshe, lo aminu bi. But what do you mean Moshe didn't? This is right, Rosler says, I mean, of course Moshe believed in you. It's not that Moshe didn't believe in God, but for that second when he hit the rock and what people call today, he lost it. But Moshe Rabbeinu, that was a very grave sin, and he was punished for that. So we have to look at the sins of our great people, understand they do sin, but their sins are sins that we really don't understand. And we have to understand that the Bechor has to be responsible. He can't be someone who is missing in the middle of the, crucial time at the crisis. He can't be AWOL. He has to lead. And that's in a certain sense why leadership has to come from Yehuda, because he was there. He stepped forward. He steps forward later on, and when he confronts Yosef, not knowing it's Yosef, and it's right, he steps forward. He asserts himself. This is the qualities of leadership that Ezra wants us to see: courage, purity of intention, being on point at the time, asserting yourself. This is what a leader has to be, and this is really an important thing. Okay, now, one other point, I really have so many things open here. Second. Yeah. A Gemara in Brachot says that Leah called him Ruvain. And she says, Ruvain, look at my son. Leah is proud of Ruvain, she says, because Yaakov took the Bechorah, right, and the bracha from Esav. Esav hated him, wanted to kill him. But Leah says, my son, even though Yosef took his birthright, right, even so, he went to Yosef and tried to save his life. This is the quality. We should never think badly of our great ones. Okay, now we're going to go into the genealogy. Pasuk Gimel. Bnei Reuven b'chor Yisrael chanochu pralu chatzon v'karmi. Reuven had 4 sons. Now, the implication is that in Pasuk Daled, Carmi, we're going from Carmi to his son, Bnei Yoel, that Yoel is the son of Carmi. This is how the Vilna Gaon explains it. It's very, and then we go into the names. The sons of Yoel, who's the son of Carmi, Shmaya, Gog, Shimi, and Pasuk Hey, Micha, Ra'aya, Baal, and Be'era. Now, when we get to Be'era, right, Be'era was the son, of this chain of the descendants of Ruvain. He was exiled. The Sher Heklah, Tilgat Pilneser, Melech Ashur. He was the chief of the Ruvaini. Now, let's talk about Be'era for a second. You probably have heard of the prophet Hosea. Hosea was the first of the 12 prophets in the Trei Asar, and his father's name was Be'eri. So Chazal say Be'era, this man, the descendant of Ruvain, who was the prince of the Ruvain tribe when they were exiled, right? At the time that Ashur, the king, being led by the king, his name was, we usually see Tiglat Pileser, and we have here Tilgat Pilneser. It's the same person. And this Be'era is the father of Hosea. Now, whenever we see, right, that a nevuah is a Hosea ben Be'eri, so the Chazal say Be'eri is also a prophet. So Be'eri, or Be'era, was the father of Hosea, and he was also a prophet. He went into Galut with the tribes, with the 10 tribes who were exiled, including the 2.5 tribes that we're talking about. And his nevuah, see, because this thing keeps going in my way. There. Okay. And according to Chazal, his nevuah, Be'eri's nevuah, was so short that they couldn't make a book out of it. They stuck it into Yeshaya, and this is what it says: "V'chiyam lechem dishu alabot v'liyadonim v'hamtzaftzafim v'hamahagim halom am el elokav yidrosh ba'ad hachayim al hametzim." Right, and then the end is l'torah l'tzuda im lo yamu kadvar asher ein lo shachar. This is Be'erah. He was the king. I'm sorry, he was the prince of the tribe of Reuven at the time of the exile. And Chazal say his name was Be'eri because he was like a well of Torah. And this was his prophecy. When they say to you in Asher, when your captors say to you, why don't you go to the necromancers and the witches and all these people who do these crazy things? Right? So you say to them, why should people who have a living God go and ask things from the dead? We have the Torah, and this is what keeps us going. So he was anxious to help the people in exile. That is the father of Hosea. Okay. Zion Bechav Mishpachtav V'Yityaches L'Toldotav Harosh Ye'il Chayahu. Again, the companions, more of Reuven, Bela, Pesached, Bela ben Azaz, ben Shema, ben Yoel, Yoshe Baroer, Nevo, Baal Ma'on. Now, when we get to this territory, okay, I want to show you also how this works on a map. Well, Mizrach Hashav, Ad Lavo Midbar, Lamina Nahar Prat, Ki Mekneim, Rovu, Beretz Gilad. So what happens? Let me just go backwards for a second in the discussion of the two and a half tribes. It's important to understand. Moving in God starts first. They come to Moshe Rabbeinu and they say, "Hey, we have a lot of crops. You've conquered the land of Sichon and Og. We like it. We want to stay here." Moshe is very disturbed by this. You remember Parshas Matos. We'll go into this, and there's a whole discussion. And finally, Moshe says, "Okay, right." If you recall, see where. Okay. B'nai Ruvain, these are the towns that they got there. Cheshbon, El Oleh, and Kiryatayim, Nevo, and Baal Ma'on, Musabot, Shem. Now, in our text, okay, right, they have Bimei Shavuot, skipping ahead. Okay, comes later. Okay, so this is for the God. They were in the Gilad, and Bnei Ruvain. Okay, I'm going ahead about. Right, the different places that they lived. Okay, go back to where we were. Going ahead, not a good idea. They had to, oh, here it is. Ad Nevo, they dwelt in Aroer and Nevo and Baal Ma'on. So you see here, Bnei Reuven got El Alechiatayim, Nevo, Baal Ma'on, and Sibma and Aroer. Bnei Gad was in Aroer. So when they got to Aroer, they dwelt as far as Aroer, but Aroer is a city of God. I want to show you a map. Okay, one map. Here's a map. Okay. So this map, make it smaller, this map of the east side, okay, you see here, this whole territory was the 2.5 tribes. And the way it went is that the southern part was Ruvain. You see Ruvain? There, all these cities that we mentioned, Aroer, Kedma, all these places for them. And further north is Gad. Gad was Gilad and many other places that we'll mention. And north of that was Menashe. Now, this whole territory you see here, that was called the Bashan, right? That whole territory is a huge area. That's what we call today the Golan Heights. So God went up to a certain point. We'll see that in the text, but I'm just showing you the map first. Went up to a certain place with their settlement, and further north, all the way heading up to the Hermon, that was half of Menashe. So we'll talk about half of Menashe in a second, but we just get that understanding. The original discussion was Reuben and Gad. Where did the half of Menashe come from? And according to Chazal, there was so much land that it was too much for Reuben and Gad. And Moshe was concerned that it would, if you leave land unsettled, it becomes dangerous and open to predators. And no politics, but yeah, you can think whatever you think because I agree with you. Okay, but Moshe had the brilliant idea of taking Menashe, which was a massive tribe, and also Menashe were from the sons of Yosef. They had proved themselves, Menashe, to be lovers of the land of Israel. Don't forget the Benot Tzlafkat came from Menashe. And so he accomplishes two things, Moshe. He fills out the extra grazing land. Menashe volunteered. He said, who would like to do this? Menashe volunteered. A couple of families from Menashe. And they took this. They probably also had a lot of flocks. But Menashe, first of all, has a connection. There's a chibur between the two halves of Menashe, which is going to be very important. And also, Menashe has a history of love for the land of Israel. They're not going to be separatists. The Benot Salafchad, the Bnei Yosef, these are people who love the land of Israel. So this is how Menashe came into this mix. Okay, back to the text. Now, on that eastern side, they dwelt all the way up north, heading toward Nahar Prat. It's kind of hard to imagine that they actually got to Nahar Prat, because in my other map, I'll show you, this is Nahar Prat is all the way up here. So it's very unlikely that they were able to settle up there. But you see, getting back here, they had a lot of cattle, they had a lot of flocks, and they increased in Gilad. Now, there's a strange thing that happens here in Pasuk Yud, running out of time. Urimei Shaul asu milchamayim hagriyim vayiplu biyadam vayeshvu ba'aleim al kol pnei mizrach Gilad. So now we have a new enemy that we never heard of before called Hagriyim. So, according to Chazal, the Hagriyim are the children of Hagar. And that means Hagar, right? Hagar's son was Ishmael. So we're talking about Ishmaelites, otherwise known as Arabs. Okay. And these were the sons of Ishmael, right? Okay, we'll get to that in a minute. But here, Eli told Ishmael ben Amram Sheolda Hagar Mitzvah Shivchat Tzarel Avram. So now we're placing the Hagarites that we are fighting against as descendants of Ishmael, which would make them these kind of Bedouin type of, tent dwellers. And they made a war with them, and they won. The Jews won. I'm going to leave that here because we're going to talk more about it in Yud Chet. So we'll come back to that idea of that war. But notice that it says in the times of Shaul. This is a strange thing. And Rashi says they were Yishmaelim because they were sons of Hagar. Now, again, I'll show you the map. It's very important to see the map. You see that Gad and Gilad, they went up north till Salcha. I don't find Salcha on this map. Forgive me, but that was the northern border of Gad. And from there, north was half of Menashe. Okay, Pasuk Yud Bet. Yoel Arosh v'shafam ha'mishneh v'yanai shafat b'Bashan. According to Chazal, these were four very great people, the heads of God, and Yoel was the head of the Sanhedrin, and Shafam was the head of the Beit Midrash, and Shafat and Yanai were judges. Now, the name Shafat should also ring bells in your head because we have the prophet Elisha. Elisha was the son of Shaphat. So when you start putting together, like when you get to someone and you don't know the genealogy, and you come to Divrei HaYamim and said, oh, okay, this is this tribe. We're talking about God. So possibly Elisha was from God, right? And Hoshea was from Reuven. We're getting this information. Pasuk Yud Gimel. V'achelu beit avotehem, Michal, Meshulam, Sheva, v'Yorai, v'Yakad, v'Zia, v'Eva, Sheva. 7 princes of God. Elam ben Abichai ben Huri ben Yaroch ben Gilad ben Michal ben Yeshishai ben Yachtah ben Buz. Okay, these sons of Abichai were subservient to Achi. Achi was the chief, Ben Avdiya, Ben Guni, Rosh Beit. These are the leaders of God in Gilad. Pasuk Tetzayim, Yeshvu Bagilad Babashet, Uviv Notel, B'chol Migushay Sharon, Al Totzotam. And they dwelt in Gilad in all these places. And Kulam Jachasu B'mei Yotam El Hud B'mei Yerobam El Israel. This is a very strange kind of statement here that I want to talk about. These 2 kings, Yotam, who was the son of Uzziah, and Yerovam Melech Israel, this is referencing the second Yerovam ben Yoash, who was Yerovam the second, who was a very successful king, if you recall, even though he was of Israel. So these 2 kings had successful reigns, and they were 38 years apart. As I'll say, that they each done the checking people's yichus at those 2 different times. So that's what we're talking about here. Now, it's important, I want to talk about one thing here. Maybe I should talk about it. Okay, when we get to the war, we'll do it now. We'll do the war. Now, starting Pasuk Yud Ches, we're talking about the war of the Hagrim. Okay, Pasuk Yud Ches. B'nei Reuven v'Gadi v'chatzi shevet Menashe min b'nei Chayil. Anashim nosei magen b'cherev. You're talking about, don't forget, these were the people who had agreed to go first to be the vanguard in conquering the land and then to go back home. So these were very brave warriors, men who carried magain, b'cherev, doche, keshet. They knew how to use a bow. Ulemudei milchama, experienced in war. And it's interesting. I was thinking about when I got to this part in my preparation, I was thinking about the cooperation between the American pilots and the Israeli pilots. And I saw a few videos about it. I read some stuff about it. It seems that the Israelis have so much practical, unfortunately, military experience to share with the Americans. And then when they looked at the American equipment, they were like, never saw such stuff before. They were blown away by the American equipment. So there is value on both sides. We hear the limudei milchama. These are people who are battle ready. Arba'im ba'arba'ela, 44,000, shvama v'shishim, 760 yotzei tzava. So this is you have almost 45,000 people. Pasuk it says, Vayesu milchamam ha'hagriyim bitur v'nafish v'nodav. Now, who are bitur, nafish, v'nodav? And this I wanted to show you here. The sons of Yishmael. Now, Yishmael has 12 sons. Nevayot Kedar, Adba'el, Mibsam, Mishmadu, Mamasa, Hadad, Tema, Yetur, Nafish. Oh, these are the same names, Yetur and Nafish. So they are clans of Yishmael. The third one, which we saw here going back a second, Nodab. Who's Nodab? We didn't see Nodab in our text here. So that mikra connects that Nodab, right, with this son, Adba'el, Nodab and Adba'el. It's not really clear exactly who that is, but that's the theory of the Dat Mikra. That makes sense, right? So you have these 3 tribes that attacked the Jewish people. Vayezu Alehem, and they were helped against them. Vayinatnu biyadam, and they were given in their hands. Notice the passive language. Hahaguyim v'choshem imahem ki lelokim zaku b'melchama. It's one of, I guess, my favorite pasuk in this Perek. They were helped. they were able to, the Hagrim were given over in their hands. All of the enemies were given over in their hands because they cried out to God in war. V'na'ator lahem, and God listened to them. Ki batchubo, because they believed in him. There's two amazing principles in this pasuk. One is when you are in trouble, war or otherwise, cry out to God. And the other is have faith in him. And these are two beautiful principles that you have to remember. One second, because you have that's where God's help comes in. Now it's interesting because the show you this, who discusses this. Okay, there's a few things I want to talk about here. Right. Okay. Karov Hashem l'chol karov, we say. Hashem is close to all who call him. When they call out to God, God listens to them. But, right, then you see, let's go back a bit. וישבו מקניהם גמליהם 50,000, צאן 250,000, חמורים 2,000 ונפש אדם 100. Now they were able to have such a great victory that they took prisoners. Notice the order here. 50,000 camels, 250,000 sheep, 2,000 donkeys, and 100,000 people. Now, if our numbers, there's a lot of going on. Let me just finish the section. Pasuk Shapell, ki chalalim rabim nafalu, ki melokim ha-milchama, vayesh v'tachteim ad hagolah. And they were they lost many people because the war came from God, and they stayed in their land until the exile in the time of Ashur and the exile of the 10 tribes. So there's a few things that I really want to talk about. It's a very interesting story. First of all, notice ki melokim ha-milchama. So the Mitzuda says, don't, you wonder, okay, how did 44,000, what is it, 44,760 people managed to take 100,000 people prisoner? We're not even talking about the people that they fought against. So clearly they were totally outnumbered. And he says, how could it be? Because the victory came from God and God's help. And fear fell upon them, and they just gave up. They just surrendered. We like those wars where God takes care of it. Hashem, take care of it for us. We love those wars. I love this one. Hit the Tanakh where there's a place where God does it. So there's a lot of interesting things that I want to talk about here. So first of all, the tefillah is the strongest weapon we have. Okay, if we go back to this pasuk, it says two things. Za'aku, they cried out in the war. So that's very interesting. But there's more to it than that. Why does God listen to them? Na'ator lahem ki batchubo. It wasn't just the tefillah. It was because they believed in God. Now there's a discussion here. The Or Chaim says a beautiful thing in Parshas Befala. Now, just the Jews were coming up to the Yam Suf. They didn't know what to do. And Hashem says to Moshe, what are you yelling at me for? Hey, what do you mean, what are you yelling at me for? Moshe Rabbeinu is davening for the Jewish people who are literally in a terrible, between a rock and a hard place. The sea is ahead of them. The Mitzvah are coming. There's no place to go. And why are you yelling at me? Tell them, tell them to move. Tell them to move. So the Or Chaim says, look at this, right? At a certain point, the tefillah stops because the judgment is very balanced. And Hashem says, I want to save you. I need one more merit for you. Your merits don't come up to the level. So now show me your faith in me. And that's at the point where Moshe tells them, travel, and Nachshon ben Aminadav jumps into the sea with full faith in God. That faith is what they call in the halacha makah b'patish. That's the last thing, and then Hashem brings the miracle. So you see here, they cried out to God, that's great. And he listens to them because they had faith in him. So there's two parts of it. Number one is Hashem helps those who dive into him. And number two is have faith. Have faith in him. The faith is even stronger, much greater than the tefillah. Have faith that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help you. Now, it's interesting that I'm going to go back for a minute to the this pasuk that talks about their flocks and all their spoils. It's a little bit disappointing because you see they're counting all the animals, and the last thing is the people. And I take your memory back to Parshas Matos, but I didn't open that for you. But trust me, they come to Moshe and they say, we're going to build pens and areas for our cattle and some cities for our children. And Moshe's like, excuse me, you got that backwards. First you build things for your children, and then you take care of your animals. People come first. So we have here a little bit of a problem. A little bit of a problem. We're going to see that it's off a little bit. Now, when you see that they have, you see, okay, here. Okay, remember the cities that they had, right? These are the cities. We have here also something very interesting. Yair ben Menashe halach v'yilkodev chavotei ma'ikrat and chavot Yair. Yair, the son of Menashe, captured some towns and he called them the Chavot Yair. Now, modern Hebrew chava is like a ranch or a farm. So that's the famous song. Madod Moshe haya chava. That's how it goes in Hebrew. Okay, now afterwards we see Novach. Novach went and captured this place and he called it Novach after himself. Now, Rashi says, I see that there's no dot in the hay, right? And that would be the possessive feminine, and that's missing to tell you that this place Novach didn't last, right? How could it not last? And over here we have a very interesting drash of Rav Schwab. Rav Schwab says, what are we learning from this? Chavot Yair, that lasted. We see Chavot Yair come up later in the Tanakh in different places. But Novach we never see again. Why did Novach fail? Because Yair had Chavot. He had stuff, right? Novach, he was completely identified with his stuff. It's a very interesting comment of Rav Schwab. Then I heard this from Rabbi Rosner. It's like blew me away. If you have an identification fully with your stuff is not going to last. That's the problem with the 2.5 tribes. It was all about their stuff. Moshe Rabbeinu has to correct them. No. First you take care of your family, then you take care of your stuff, right? And this is going to be their problem until the Galut. And you see when they win this war, because they have faith, they're good people, they have faith, they cry to God, and they win, but they're still concerned with the stuff. What about people? People should be before stuff. And Rav Schwab says that the only exception to this rule is his rule is you can't allow yourself to fully identify with your stuff. That's not a healthy situation. Then he says, the only exception is for Torah and mitzvahs. David says, I need tefillah. I need tefillah. I'm totally become prayer. It's become part of my personality. I'm a Shomer Shabbat, I'm a Shabbos person, I'm a Torah and mitzvahs person. That can consume you, but not stuff. Interesting comment of Rav Schwab. Okay, now we go now to the sad end of the story. Pasuk Chav Gimel. B'nei Chatzi Shevim. Oh, first, but the half tribe of Menashe. B'nei Chatzi Shevim Menashe Yashvu Ba'aretz Mibashan Ad Baal Chemon U'Snir V'Har Chemon Heimaravu. They lived in the northern part of the Bashan, that is on the way to the Hermon, and they they multiplied faster than Reuben and Gad. They were just huge. Menashe was just so many. Okay, but Ela Rashi Beit Avotam Be'ef Yishid Eliel Ezriel B'Yirmiyah B'Hovadia Hodavia Yachtiel. I love these names. Anashim Giborei Chayil Anshe Shemot Rashim the Beit Avotam. And so these are the people of Menashe and their leaders. But now we have the sad part where we say, Vayima'alu pasuk Chaf Hei, Vayima'alu ba'alokei avotehem, Vayiznu acharei Elohei amei ha'aretz asher shmil lokim b'fneihem. Now you see here, Rashi is asking a very logical question. They betrayed, Ma'al is a betrayal. They betrayed God and they went astray after the gods of the land that God had destroyed from before them. And Rashi says, like, I don't understand, right? God got rid of these people. So to merit, our God got rid of these people, and therefore their gods didn't help them. And now you want to worship their gods. What are you thinking? So Chafam is a very strange pasuk. Vayar Elokei Yisrael et ruach. God aroused the spirit of the enemy, first Pul, who was the king of Ashur, and then Tilgat-Pilneser, another king of Ashur. He aroused them to exile. Vayagleim laruveni v'lagadi v'lachatzi b'menashe v'yivi'em lachlach v'chavor v'hara v'nahar gozan ad hayom hazeh. So I do have that map for you here. This is Israel in the bottom corner here. I'm having trouble getting everything organized here. You see here's Reuven, Gilad, Gad, and Menashe. They're going into exile all the way north, past Haran, where Avram came from, to Gozan, this areas, and that's where they send them. And it's very, very sad. And from here, we're going to move to a short discussion of B'nai Levi. But just to sum up this idea, there's a lot of discussion about the exile of the of 10 tribes, and the exile of the 2.5 tribes seems to have been first. So it says in Mishlei, right? Nachla mevohelet barishona b'achritalo tevarach. You may hurry and grab your inheritance, but it may not be blessed at the end. And this is a reference to Reuven and Gad and half Menashe. They took land first. They were the first to go into exile. A very sad story. And first to settle, first to be thrown out. And kind of inexplicable how they went bad, when those gods were so useless. But something that the Gemara says here, just a very quick, from the time Mishagalu Shevet Reuven Shevet Gad V'Chatzi Shevet Menashe Bitlu Yovlot, they stopped counting Yobel and Shemitah. Very immediate and sad consequence because they weren't all in the land. Now let's move very quickly, only have a few minutes, to the last bit here. I just want to say a few things. It's a lot of names. And this is stuff you know, right? B'nai Levi, Gershon, Kasmar are very famous. B'nai Kas, Amram, Yitzhak, Evan, Uziel. B'nai Amram, Aaron, Rosh Miriam. Oh, we know all these people there. Nadav, Abi, Elazar, Tamar. And now, notice the way it's working. We're not discussing any of these people who are, there's a lot to discuss there, but we're going straight to Elazar, Halid, Pinchas. And we're going to go from B'nai Levi directly through the lineage, the genealogy, right down to I'll show you Pinchas, Yeshua, Buki, Uzi, Yizrachia, Marayot, Amaria, Achitzuv, Tzadok, Achimatz, Azariah, Yochanan, another Azariah. Who is Shekihain Babayda Shabana Shlomo? He was actually already Kohen Gadol at the time that Shlomo built the Beis Hamikdash. And he had a son named Amaria, and Amaria had a son named Achitzuv, and Achitzuv had a son named Tzadok, and Tzadok had a son Shalom, Chuki, Azariah, Zayel, Sraya, Tzadok, Tzadok. This is the last pasuk in the Perek. Halach b'haglot Hashem et Yehuda v'Yerushalayim b'Nebuchadnezzar. In other words, we have seen an unbroken chain from Levi through his children to Pinchas and Eleazar. From Eleazar to Pinchas, a straight chain of Kohanim Gedolim until Yehotzadak, who was the Kohen Gadol at the time of the Golus. Now, interesting question here we have to ask ourselves. Where are all the Kohen Gadol's that we know that weren't mentioned here, like Eli? Where's Eli, right? Evyatar, right, who helped up. Where are these other people? And so we have an interesting conclusion that we have to come to here, and that is the point of this list is not to give us a continuous list of who were the Kohanim Gedolim, but to show us, and this is again following the way Ezra operates, the continuous line from Levi till the same Kohen Gadol went into Golus, right? And so even though there were times when the family of Itamar, that's Eli and his descendants, they were Kohen Gadol, even though some people weren't mentioned in this list, what we're doing here is showing, like Ezra showed about the Malchus Beis David, this Malchus came right through this line, and now the Kahuna Gadol goes right through this line. So when we turn around and we see, right, that Yehotzadak's son is going to be Yehoshua, he's going to be the Kohen Gadol at the time the Jews are coming back. You see that this is giving us koach, this is giving us continuity, this is giving us strength. So it's not, the point of what Ezra is doing here is to show you the direct line from Levi to the Kohanim Gedolim who are going to be at the time of the Second Temple. And this Yehotzadak, by the way, was also a brother of Ezra himself. So we're coming full circle here, and we see that there's a method to what Ezra is doing. Okay, I'm only 1 minute over. I'm very pleased because it's a long Perek. Okay, so we're going to stop here, stop the share. And if you have any questions or ideas or thoughts.
Thank you very much, Esther.
Mazel tov on the weddings.
Yeah, mazel
Thank
tov.
you.
Thank you.
All right, Laila Tov to those who are in Israel. And
Good night.
great rest of day for those who are not.
Yes.
Yes.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
All right, take care then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.